Hey there, I am happy to share with you a new concept I've been working on called Celebratory Technology for Neurodiversity. So this is the first stab at it, so I'll talk about its conceptualization here, and hopefully that'll answer a lot of questions and save you time from reading my papers. Okay, anyway, like this says here, I'm Luann Boyd. I am a professor at Chapman University, and my work is on neurodiversity technology. So where I am now is trying to address the biggest problem that we have in this space, and that is not so much dealing with the symptoms that come along with neurodivergent conditions like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and so forth, but rather the bigger issue, and that is society's perception of these labels. And so this social stigma has actually been talked about as being more harmful than actually living with the symptoms themselves. And so as someone who had a clinical practice or been in clinical practice for over 20 years working in this space, this really hit me in the heart. And so this image, this icon of stigmatization and kind of being chastised to the point of crucifixion really brings home kind of the experience of social stigma and makes me want to target that as a place for intervention. And so we haven't done this so much with technology, or at least human computer interaction, assistive technology, accessible technologies. We do critical studies to bring awareness to these issues, but this is an actual intervention where we're going to use intervention strategies to address this societal problem. So let me walk you through kind of what it looks like and what the whole ecosystem is. And so first of all, this is my first stab at kind of talking about an ecosystem. And part of this is because I feel like uh, being an academic, you're kind of at different stages of your career, right? You start as a student and you read so many papers and you only know so much about the space. And then as you get along in your years, you get exposed to more and more and more situations. And so then at this point in my 10 years or so in this academic world, I've encountered these first three use cases. And so I wanted to create this fourth. And so I'll walk through each of them individually. So the first, the one I'm putting on the far left, is the Critical Disability Study Scholarship and Design. So this is a space where a critical perspective is taken, and usually these are in the form of either kind of a social media campaign addressing or directly commenting on things happening in the public sphere, and or academic work that where certain work is called out for its potential problematic behavior, its ableist behavior, and so forth. So basically, the goal of this kind of work is really important, and that is to bring attention to the misalignment between the lived experience and societal perception. And so this really, again, rings true when I've spent decades working on the clinical symptomology of autism specifically, but that is just one layer of the lived experience, and the much bigger problem again is kind of the perception of living with these. So anyway, this is an exciting change that I'm kind of have grown out of, I would say, directly because of my interactions with this critical disability space. And so I thank my peers and the field at large for helping me grow in this way, because I feel like it's going to bring something very fruitful, hopefully, that I feel uniquely qualified to bring. So let's go to the next square here, and this is the assistive technology realm. This is what I was brought in the field to do. This is what attracted me to human-computer interaction. And assistive technologies are those that are targeting usually the disabled user, the neurodivergent user, as the user of the technology to remedy or alleviate or train, teach, support, otherwise help a person perform differently. Generally, these are at the behavioral level. So my work particularly targeted social emotional interaction, but there's also technologies that target communication, academics, and life skills, vocation, all these other areas that are listed here. And this isn't to say that these are not needed. They just may not be the prevailing issue that people are living with, but they are still issues that people are living with, and they still warrant attention and support. The ways we go about it require us to really examine our stance on disability and why these changes need to take place, or if they need to take place. And so for that, there's more reading in the critical space to kind of balance out these two opposing positions, even though you'll see that I put them next to each other in this ecosystem. So to get a little bit further into this, which I never have time, so I'm so thankful for the internet giving me the space to kind of talk about these two different views, these two conflicting views, the personal view, the lived experience view, the critical view, if you will, the perspective, and a therapeutic view. So what I have here is a learning pyramid, or I'm going to call it a cone of learning, because there is another dimension. I wanted to make it three-dimensional here. I guess pyramids are three-dimensional, but anyway, I like this idea of these rings because it shows you how complex the clinical world is in terms of autism, ADHD, dyslexia, learning disabilities, and such. We have this whole pyramid of learning that we go through, and there are different skills that happen at these different stages. This looks a lot like development. This also happens in milliseconds, processing information from the bottom to the top. It also like a computer stack, taking the sensory input in and then doing all the processing till you get the final high level processing at the end. So what I've done here on the left is kind of name the disciplines, all the different disciplines. And this is just kind of a handful, a high level sketch of different disciplines, whole canons of literature in each of these categories about how they approach neurodiversity. Specifically, I'm thinking about autism since I've spent 30, 40 years reading kind of this clinical literature. And so this is the stuff I know or have known the most, and kind of how it all fits together. And you can see they kind of each fit pretty neatly in this diagram into their own category, but in reality, they overlap quite a bit more. And there is a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration and understanding and communication. But nobody is necessarily an expert in all of these things, just like in our computer field, nobody's necessarily a unicorn, although we have people that do have a lot of knowledge about a lot of these different areas. I'm completely fascinated with the integration of all these different areas. So then the opposition to this is on the other half of this ring, or if you peel these layers off, these labels of these different interests that these disciplines have, and just specific slices of a person. The other side is the whole person. So who experiences everything from the reflexes to their learning abilities. And what they're looking for is usually from technology is something that's going to improve their quality of life. That is the goal of technology, right? To improve our lives, to make things better. Better in what way? For who? For what? What is the purpose of technology, if not to make our lives better and to help us with our own purpose? So here we've got users saying, improve my quality of life. The way we do that, the mechanisms to do that probably are not necessarily lined up with the mechanisms to achieve these goals. And so we'll get more into that in this next illustration. So this is a more detailed version of that same learning cone, where some of those skills at each level are broken out into smaller skills. So you kind of see which discipline might address an issue in any of these areas. And this is just typical learning for everybody. These are, again, just a snapshot of the millions of things we learn over the course of our lifetime, and how we process it. This is just kind of big chunks of categories, if you will. And the way that the clinical world views neurodivergence is that one or more of these, there's your own kind of mosaic of where these problems occur, and then you get the corresponding therapist, clinician, educator, whatever, to address those specific skills. And hopefully, if you address each of these kind of potholes in your learning cone, then you'll have some success toward kind of the semblance of everything being united, integrated, and working well together. So all this, again, assumes that the deficits, or posits that the deficits are occurring within the person's internal wiring, if you will, their processing of all these different kinds of skills. And so all the interventions are addressed sort of at that level. So you can have things coming at you at all the different angles. Imagine the highest level of impairment that might be physically possible, and how many therapies could be involved. You could probably have all of these skills involved. And then one person is the recipient of all that different intervention, and kind of how that experience is in terms of being here. And not that we don't want to be intensive and provide all that we know how to provide. It's just, it's a lot to think about it when you think about the positionality of the person receiving that information. So back to that second half of the cone when it's focused on the user's quality of life, the field of accessible technology really is a different beast from assistive technology in the sense that it's not about assisting with a particular training of or rehabilitation of or development of a skill, a task, an ability. It's on that improving quality of life. It's on providing access to culture, community, resources, relationships, anything in the environment that's blocked. And maybe it's blocked because of this person's particular impairment, or maybe it's blocked because of the way society has engineered itself to accommodate basic or general or normative approaches. And so here the technologies are going to shift to focus on the environment as the place where the breakdown is happening, not necessarily as within the body of the disabled person. So you've got two use cases here, both of these, one being assisting the disabled user with some deficit in their learning cone, and the other providing access to resources because of a deficit probably in their learning and their learning cone, but not targeting changing that deficit, targeting changing the environment. So kind of looking inward and looking outward, but maybe at the same skill area or environmental barrier. And so again, we're kind of showing this learning curve where our sensory input is coming in through all of our senses here at the bottom of this pyramid, and then we process this information till the point where we can execute our behavior or benefit from the learning that we have. Here, I just wanted to take a moment and talk about what is our role as UX designers in all of this. We talked about all the clinical people, and if you're a UX designer without a couple of decades of clinical experience yourself, you've probably partnered with, or maybe you've partnered with either people on this half, the left side, what are all the clinicians, the various types of clinicians that could be out there that have their own specific view and perspective and expertise, or maybe you've partnered with people living with neurodivergence and you've heard from them. And I'd like to break down all those different individual skill cells into these 4 basic user experience goals that we might have if we're working with people with lived experience. And that is first and foremost, and I've prioritized these because it just makes sense that starting with receiving sensory input about the environment, we have to make it comfortable. And so these first 2 layers that over here say neurology and occupational therapy and such as kind of experts in terms of clinical interventions, over here, technologists can also prioritize or alternatively prioritize making systems comfortable or making people comfortable in environments through a system. And then the second layer would be making the information or making the environment or making culture accessible to them. And then next, actionable. Just because you have these first 2 doesn't guarantee that what you're actually providing is something somebody can do something about. Each of these I have personal examples I could talk to you about in my own research. And then lastly, learnable. If somebody's going to grow and learn and they're at this last kind of highest step of what they want to get from their technology, maybe it's this. So kind of these are our priorities in terms of our learning, our user experience goals. And so with that, we'll move on to inclusive technology. And this would be another use case where we have mixed ability groups like schools with children with and without disabilities, work environments, public environments, online environments, all these kinds of places. And so we've had a trend over the last decade or maybe longer of making sure systems are usable by a variety of people with a variety of skills and a variety of goals. And so here again, it's on providing reciprocal support. Oh, there's a little dangler there. Anyway, so this idea is one step toward destigmatizing assistive technologies and accessible technologies that when they are only designed for a disabled user, that in themselves is a signifier of disability and can be perceived by the public or even the user as less than, because it requires additional support, burden, and some level of burden. And so by making things inclusive where there's additional functionality that serves more people's needs, you remove that barrier, that signifier that this is a special or different or clinical device, and then it's something that can be used by anybody, everybody, or as many people as possible. Within that, we can also acknowledge that we can support each other, that we have an interdependence on each other, And so beyond being just inclusive, it can also be interdependent. And so these are the technologies that are most current in terms of really acknowledging what each of our roles are and how we support each other. And then it's not kind of a one directional experience because somebody may be working in a group with disabled people. All right, and so then from there, what I realized was that I felt was left out of at least the HCI literature was this other user group, the public, that's providing this ongoing or sustaining this social stigma of living with this disability or living with diversity. And how do we break that down from an interventionist perspective? What can we do to make some changes here? We have a variety of other things that other people are doing, but my unique position in this space is really to take the decades of interventionist strategies that I know and apply them to a new problem, if you will, rather than targeting deficits within a body, targeting deficits within a society. And so I'm going to use the same strategies here, but turn the lens out and kind of look at stigma as the place of intervention. And so here, the goal again is to shift the burden of change from the person with the disability, changing their learning, changing their approach, changing something about their body, their experience, to society changing for them. And that could be environmental changes like we do in accessibility, or it could actually be people's thoughts, opinions, and approaches. So it's a little bit more nebulous than kind of what we've done before. So how are we going to go about doing this? So at this first stab of this, my out of the gate, I thought we would rely on something called contact theory. And this theory states that basically the more contact you have with a group, the more likely you are to break down stereotypes about that group. And breaking down stereotypes is one of the primary ways to reduce social stigma about that group. You actually know people in that group, you realize that stereotypes are that they are just snapshots and they don't really describe real people individually. And you get an opportunity to kind of make your own opinions and kind of let go of that stereotype as you have real data to kind of fill in its place. So how can we do that with technology? So the two mechanisms that I have come across thus far are increasing knowledge about neurodiversity, providing information to people, to the masses about what it is, what does it mean, so that it's not a scary concept, like it doesn't necessarily mean less than it, just what does different mean? And even though we're wired to be afraid of different, to be suspicious of different, that is kind of using that primitive brain. And can we use some higher level processing to understand that there is beauty in diversity and that there's something to be learned from our diversity. And these are not the kind of divergent behaviors that are warranting being afraid of nonetheless. The other way, the other mechanism that we can use to break down these stereotypes is to increase high quality contact with people with neurodiversity or neurodivergent individuals. And so the particular pain point is that first impression. That tends to be a place where people sum you up and make a judgment consciously, unconsciously, that our biases kind of show up on those initial contacts. So you might not know a lot about neurodiversity. Somebody presents to you as neurodivergent, and kind of boom, there you've got kind of social stigma waiting to be to go into motion. So anyway, to address this, I did about 3-hour probe with an adult in a PhD program who has autism, is very articulate about disability studies, his own lived experience. He's an advocate. He's a PhD student. He's a researcher. And I'd even call him a friend at this point. We've known each other a number of years, and we spent a lot of time talking about what it would look like to celebrate neurodivergence rather than try to treat it and such. And so we came across, well, after speaking with him for several hours, I pitched this idea of that first impression being the pain point I wanted to change. And what if we used a disco ball instead of a profile picture to communicate things about people, to kind of give a metadata analysis, like a heat map of their personality or their characteristics or their trends, so that it's kind of mutually understood by everybody. It's for anybody, not one group or the other, but to kind of blur the line and just give more information about individuals. Again, you can see where the goal here is to kind of break down stereotypes. I'm not from one bucket or the other. I'm this unique thing. I'm my own unique disco ball. I have my own shiny colors, and whatever combination of colors make up my disco ball, they are all beautiful because they're shiny, gorgeous, fun disco balls. So these are the questions we kind of are the types of questions we came up with in that first probe, and kind of how we might lay this out. And so the themes that really came out of that first work, and I think they resonate with themes that we hear from other advocates and in the literature, are about bringing awareness, acceptance, and appreciation to living as someone who's neurodivergent. And so to bring this into a little bit more clarity, I wanted to kind of create a use case so people can concretize this in their brain. What could this look like? So what you have here is a screenshot from a Zoom breakout group. Now that everybody's familiar with Zoom, and why don't we leverage some of the functionality there? If people could load a disco ball, their own personalized disco ball, instead of an image of their face or an image, a meme of their cat or what have you, that could give some metadata to everyone right away who understands what these 12 squares could mean. And these, of course, could be personalized for context and could contain a key. This is just kind of a first initial mapping. 12 seemed to be a good number to be diverse enough to not put labels on people, because there's 12 different buckets here that could have many different combinations, because there's multiple answers for any of these. So it's very individualized, very customized, and hopefully very interesting. And so you learn kind of where you're in line in terms of similar to people, where you're different, and just what's interesting about other people. And none of these necessarily have to out anyone as being disabled or not. The whole idea here is to get away from that stereotype that's that first initial impression, to meeting people more authentically, more in a more in-depth, higher processing, not fear-based difference, but kind of an elated experience, because we are different in some ways and the same in some ways, and we have that knowledge to kind of begin our interactions together. So when we do design probes in this space, what we're trying to do is find ways to motivate people to provide a level of awareness about the autistic experience or any other neurodivergent experience or any disabled experience or minoritized experience. This is just my area of interest, but certainly I think this applies to many, many, many lived experiences. So awareness, again, acceptance and appreciation. And so appreciation, I know that can be cringy, because there is a phenomenon out there known as inspiration porn, where people are not necessarily appreciating what feels like appreciation, what feels like pandering. There's a line there, and I think there's lots of room for discussion. I think it's a place we need to kind of dig in and understand better, if people are trying to appreciate differences and how that is received, and just the back and forth, what it looks like and what good it can do and what harm it could potentially do. So anyway, this is just my first stab at kind of what could go into these kinds of technologies. And I think that's what I've got for now. Stay tuned, there'll be more coming. This is my life's work, so you'll see more of me. Thanks for watching.